reputation, that's man's idol set up against God, the maker of all laws, who hath commanded us we should not kill, and yet we say we must, for reputation. What honest man can either fear his own, or else will hurt another's reputation? Fear to do base unworthy things is valor, if they be done to us, to suffer them is valor too. Ben Jonson. The Colonel was walking pensively up and down the parlor, when the officious landlady re-entered to take his commands. Having given them in the manner he thought would be most acceptable for the good of the house, he begged to detain her a moment. "I think," he said, "madam, if I understood the good people right, Mr. Bertram lost his son in his 5th year?" "Oh sir, there's nae doubt o' that, though there are mony idle clashes, tittle-tattle, about the way and manner, for it's an old story now, and everybody tells it, as we were doing, there I'm way by the Ingleside. But lost the bairn was in his 5th year, as your honour says, Colonel, and the news being rashly told to the leddy, then great with child, cost her life that salmon night, and the laird never throve after that day, but was just careless of everything, though, when his daughter Miss Lucy grew up, she tried to keep order within doors, but what could she do, poor thing, so now they're out of house and hauled." "Can you recollect, madam, about what time of the year the child was lost?" The landlady, after a pause, and some recollection, answered, she was positive it was about this season, and added some local recollections that fixed the date in her memory, as occurring about the beginning of November, 17 The stranger took 2 or 3 turns round the room in silence, but signed to Mrs. MacCandlish not to leave it. "Did I rightly apprehend," he said, "that the estate of Ellangowan is in the market?" "In the market, it will be selled the morn to the highest bidder, that's no the morn, Lord help me, which is the Sabbath, but on Monday, the first free day, and the furniture and stocking is to be rupit, auctioned, at the same time on the ground. It's the opinion of the Hale country, that the sale has been shamefully forced on at this time, when there's a say little money stirring in Scotland why this weary American war, that somebody may get the land a bargain, dill be in them, that I should say a say." The good lady's wrath rising at the supposed injustice. "And where will the sale take place?" "On the ye premises, as the advertisement says, that's at the house of Ellangowan, your honour, as I understand it." "And who exhibits the title deeds, rent roll, and plan?" "A very decent man, sir, the sheriff substitute of the county, who has authority from the Court of Session. He's in the town just now, if your honour would like to see hint, and he can tell you mair about the loss of the bairn than onybody, for the sheriff depute, that's his principal, like, took much pains to come at the truth o' that matter, as I have heard." "And this gentleman's name is?" "Macmorland, sir, he's a man o' character, and well spoken o'. Send my compliments, Colonel Mannering's compliments to him, and I would be glad he would do me the pleasure of supping with me, and bring these papers with him, and I beg, good madam, you will say nothing of this to any one else." "Me, sir? Ne'er a word shall I say. I wish your honour, a curtsy, or ony honourable gentleman that's fought for his country, another curtsy, had the land, since the old family maun quit, a sigh, rather than that wily scoundrel, Clausen, that's risen on the ruin of the best friend he ever had, and now I think on't, I'll slip on my hood and pattens, and gang to Mr. Macmorland Missile, he's at Hamey and now it's hardly a step." "Do so, my good landlady, and many thanks, and bid my servant step here with my portfolio in the meantime." In a minute or two, Colonel Mannering was quietly seated with his writing materials before him. We have the privilege of looking over his shoulder as he writes, and we willingly communicate its substance to our readers. The letter was addressed to Arthur Mervyn, Esq., of Mervyn Hall, Llanbraithwaite, Westmoreland. It contains some account of the writer's previous journey since parting with him, and then proceeded as follows. "And now, why will you still upbraid me with my melancholy, Mervyn, do you think, after the lapse of 25 years, battles, wounds, imprisonment, you, who have remained in the bosom of domestic happiness, experience little change, that your step is as light and your fancy is full of sunshine, is a blessed effect of health and temperament, cooperating with content and a smooth current down the course of life. But my career has been one of difficulties, and doubts, and errors. From my infancy I have been the sport of accident, and though the wind has often borne me into harbor, it has seldom been into that which the pilot destined. Let me recall to you, but the task must be brief, the odd and wayward fates of my youth, and the misfortunes of my manhood. The former, you will say, had nothing very appalling. All was not for the best, but all was tolerable. My father, the eldest son of an ancient but reduced family, left me with little, save the name of the head of the house, to the protection of his more fortunate brothers. They were so fond of me that they almost quarreled about me. My uncle, the bishop, would have had me in orders, and offered me a living. My uncle, the merchant, would have put me into a counting house, and proposed to give me a share in the thriving concern of Mannering and Marshall, in Lombard Street. So, between these two stools, or rather these two soft, easy, well-stuffed chairs of divinity and commerce, my unfortunate person slipped down, and pitched upon a dragoon saddle. Again, the bishop wished me to marry the niece and heiress of the Dean of Lincoln, and my uncle, the alderman, proposed to me the only daughter of old Slowthorne, the great wine merchant, rich enough to play at span counters with moidores, and make thread papers of banknotes, and somehow I slipped my neck out of both nooses, and married poor Sophia Wellwood. You will say, my military career in India, when I followed my regiment there, should have given me some satisfaction, and so it assuredly has. You will remind me also, that if I disappointed the hopes of my guardians, I did not incur their displeasure, that the bishop, at his death, bequeathed me his blessing, his manuscript sermons, and a curious portfolio, containing the heads of eminent divines of the Church of England, and that my uncle, Sir Paul Mannering, left me sole heir and executor to his large fortune. Yet this availeth me nothing. I told you I had that upon my mind which I should carry to my grave with me, a perpetual aloes in the draught of existence. I will tell you the cause more in detail than I had the heart to do while under your hospitable roof. You will often hear it mentioned, and perhaps with different and unfounded circumstances. I will, therefore, speak it out, and then let the event itself, and the sentiments of melancholy with which it has impressed me, never again be subject of discussion between us. Sophia, as you well know, followed me to India. She was as innocent as gay, but, unfortunately for us both, as gay as innocent. My own manners were partly formed by studies I had forsaken, and habits of seclusion, not quite consistent with my situation as commandant of a regiment in a country where universal hospitality is offered and expected by every settler claiming the rank of a gentleman. In a moment of peculiar pressure, you know how hard we were sometimes run to obtain white faces to countenance our line of battle. A young man, named Brown, joined our regiment as a volunteer, and finding the military duty more to his fancy than commerce, in which he had been engaged, remained with us as a cadet. Let me do my unhappy victim justice. He behaved with such gallantry on every occasion that offered, that the first vacant commission was considered as his due. I was absent for some weeks upon a distant expedition. When I returned, I found this young fellow established quite as the friend of the house, and habitual attendant of my wife and daughter. It was an arrangement which displeased me in many particulars. Though no objection could be made to his manners or character, yet I might have been reconciled to his familiarity in my family, but for the suggestions of another. If you read over What I Never Dare Open, the play of Othello, you will have some idea of what followed. I mean of my motives. My actions, thank God, were less reprehensible. There was another cadet ambitious of the vacant situation. He called my attention to what he led me to term coquetry between my wife and this young man. Sophia was virtuous, but proud of her virtue, and, irritated by my jealousy, she was so imprudent as to press and encourage an intimacy which she saw I disapproved and regarded with suspicion. Between Brown and me there existed a sort of internal dislike. He made an effort or two to overcome my prejudice, but, prepossessed as I was, I placed them to a wrong motive. Feeling himself repulsed, and with scorn, he desisted, and as he was without family and friends, he was naturally more watchful of the deportment of one who had both. It is odd with what torture I write this letter. I feel inclined, nevertheless, to protract the operation, just as if my doing so could put off the catastrophe which has so long embittered my life. But it must be told, and it shall be told briefly. My wife, though no longer young, was still eminently handsome, and let me say thus far in my own justification, she was fond of being thought so. I am repeating what I said before. In a word, of her virtue I never entertained a doubt, but, pushed by the artful suggestions of Archer, I thought she cared little for my peace of mind, and that the young fellow, Brown, paid his attentions in my despite, and in defiance of me. He perhaps considered me, on his part, as an oppressive aristocratic man, who made my rank in society, and in the army, the means of galling those whom circumstances placed beneath me. And if he discovered my silly jealousy, he probably considered the fretting me in that sore point of my character, as one means of avenging the petty indignities to which I had it in my power to subject him. Yet an acute friend of mine gave a more harmless, or at least a less offensive, construction to his attentions, which he conceived to be meant for my daughter Julia, though immediately addressed to propitiate the influence of her mother. This could have been no very flattering or pleasing enterprise on the part of an obscure and nameless young man, but I should not have been offended at this folly, as I was at the higher degree of presumption I suspected. Offended, however, I was, and in a mortal degree. A very slight spark will kindle a flame where everything lies open to catch it. I have absolutely forgot the proximate cause of quarrel, but it was some trifle which occurred at the card table, which occasioned high words and a challenge. We met in the morning beyond the walls and esplanade of the fortress which I then commanded, on the frontiers of the settlement. This was arranged for Brown's safety, had he escaped. I almost wish he had, though at my own expense, but he fell by the first fire. We strove to assist him, but some of these lulais, a species of native banditti who were always on the watch for prey, poured in upon us. Archer and I gained our horses with difficulty, and cut our way through them after a hard conflict, in the course of which he received some desperate wounds. To complete the misfortunes of this miserable day, my wife, who suspected the design with which I left the fortress, had ordered her palanquin to follow me, and was alarmed and almost made prisoner by another troop of these plunderers. She was quickly released by a party of our cavalry, but I cannot disguise from myself that the incidents of this fatal morning gave a severe shock to health already delicate. The confession of Archer, who thought himself dying, that he had invented some circumstances, and, for his purposes, put the worst construction upon others, and the full explanation and exchange of forgiveness with me which this produced, could not check the progress of her disorder. She died within about 8 months after this incident, bequeathing me only the girl, of whom Mrs. Mervyn is so good as to undertake the temporary charge. Julia was also extremely ill, so much so, that I was induced to throw up my command and return to Europe, where her native air, time, and the novelty of the scenes around her have contributed to dissipate her dejection and restore her health.